I'm not like the biggest like godhead or anything, but I don't think that we're here on accident. The world goes through ebbs and flows of pain and suffering, going back to man and free markets and mixing their labor with the resources around them. I think in a way that's God working through them and the Holy Spirit to create innovation. Bitcoin is manifestation of that innovation.
What's going on, my fellow Bitcoiners? I'm John Chanot, and welcome to episode 18 of the Bitcoin Path podcast. This is a show where we have deeper conversations about Bitcoin and self-sovereignty, about how this new magic internet money is changing the world and changing ourselves at the same time. In this episode, I'm excited to share my conversation with Mr. Pseu, aka Phil Gibson. Phil and I got to meet in person around the Bear Arms and Bitcoin conference in Austin, Texas last month. We connected over the fact that both of us host a Bitcoin podcast and really had a similar journey to arriving at Bitcoin through our libertarian principles. Phil is a Bitcoiner, he's a musician, and he hosts his podcast called A Boy Named Pseu, which is about all things Bitcoin. Phil and I had an excellent deep talk about the Bitcoin social layer, Citadels, love, religion, and spirituality, and the harsh yet beautiful reality of the free market that Bitcoin is bringing about in the world. Be sure to follow Phil on Twitter at Mr. Pseu, that's MRPSEU. And as always, if you want to support the show, be sure to like it, subscribe, and share with anyone that you think might be interested in it and resonate with the message, and visit thebitcoinpath.com to learn more about other events and ways to contribute. Also, for all of you guys coming out to Miami for the Bitcoin 2021 conference this June, my buddy Jason and I, and really on behalf of the Miami Bitcoiners meetup, we wanted to throw a party for the plebs that are coming into town. It's going to be June 3rd. It's a Thursday night before the conference starts at 7 p.m. It's just going to be an awesome party. The theme is have fun staying pleb. We may not be able to have fun staying poor because we all have Bitcoin, but we're going to have fun staying pleb. And the tickets are on sale at plebparty.com. You can get more info there. And if you pay with Bitcoin or Lightning, you get a 10% discount with the code PlebsUseBitcoin. And I hope to see you there. All that's going to be in the show notes. And with that, let's get into this episode with Phil Gibson.
Thank God for Bitcoin and Bitcoiners. That's really what I'm most bullish on when it comes to Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, man. I'm the same way, and I was that way before I had actually met Bitcoiners in person, and then when I actually met Bitcoiners in person, then it was definitely accelerated. That just that sense of like camaraderie, the melding of minds, right? Like we're all kind of grokking this thing on our own and exploring things and thinking about. I'm amazed at how much like mind energy Bitcoin kind of like consumes it, especially at first when you're first kind of like understanding it and understanding the implications that it has on the world. And so then when you get together with other people who've like gone through that same sort of red pill experience, waking up in the matrix and seeing it for what it is, it's definitely it's a special experience to share with other people for sure.
Yeah, it lifts a lot of the pressure off. It's I'm sure it makes dating a lot easier too if you're on Tinder or whatever and like the first word in like your bio is just Bitcoin, or not even just dating, just meeting people in general. It's like if you can get that out of the way, then it's smooth sailing from there.
Yeah, man. I think relationships are built on core values, and what I've found to be very interesting about Bitcoin is like it gathers. It's sort of a selector. Uh, it it brings people together who are self-selecting for the values of what freedom, truth, and virtue, or freedom, truth, and meaning. These types of things that we tend to hold as like as our primary focus in life above pretty much everything else. And other people, it doesn't mean everyone's the same. Like there's so many varying personalities and so
Oh
many
yeah.
varying like opinions and beliefs and everything like that. But it makes for it makes for a good community, I think.
Yeah, I
Dude,
think.
before we go on, I have to say I fucked up the beginning of this. I paused the recording
Oh no.
before and I didn't.
Usually, if you just like pause it or like you hit stop and then you hit record it again, it will just give you two files.
Yeah, no, so I paused it before you came on, and I forgot to hit the record button when you first came on. So I
Fuck
missed
it.
part of your initial talk.
Oh, it's okay.
But that'll just be for you and me to
We can redo it. Fuck it. I don't
to-
care.
No, yeah. So, well, I just want to go back to sort of you were talking about your personal experience, and I thought that was really prescient. Like, how because I asked you about Austin. We met in Austin a couple weeks ago. We met around the Bitcoin and Guns conference, and I'd asked you about growing up in Austin or just spending time there, and you were talking about meeting other Bitcoiners and how going out to Rainy Street was one of your like second or third time going out there, even though you've been there for quite a while. But yeah, so I don't know. Can you
Yeah, dude.
go back to what you were
Yeah,
saying?
when we were talking how also Bitcoiners self-select like Bitcoin and they kind of filter out all these other ideas and characteristics of people and what they believe in as for their virtues. And it's kind of like what Pierre Bouchard talks about is they kind of meet at the Schelling point. And you know that if someone says that they're a Bitcoiner, you know that they vetted themselves and they've gone through a lot of different experiments. And, someone could come as far as like, oh, they're going to be a socialist. And then they just listen to podcasts after podcasts. Like I was hearing Urim Brook and Michael Malice talk about this on the Lex Friedman podcast recently. And they were talking about how like people do this with Ayn Rand and Randians, and so they might start like people will find Ayn Rand and just objectivism, and you can apply this to like um this word's hard for me, libertarianism. But like once you get to like that Schelling point of like free markets and all of that, you come a long way because you might identify as a socialist first and you think it's just like this utopia, and then you get cynical, and then you also might already have those ideals of okay, free markets work, taxation is theft, and then you finally find the the square that fits in the square peg, or the square peg that fits in the square hole, and that is Bitcoin or libertarianism or objectivism. And that's kind of how I felt when I started hanging out with Bitcoiners, because I never considered myself as an Austinite when I moved here, because it was kind of the same reason I didn't really hang out with a lot of people in college, because I couldn't really relate to people. I felt like I was out of place when I was even at parties or get-togethers. It's just like everyone was, at a pajama party, we weren't all ideologically aligned, and a lot of people were still figuring out who they were. And not to say that I know exactly who I am, but just my core principles in themselves. I feel like Bitcoin is basically the finish line. And before Bitcoin, I kind of came from like a, I guess, right wing voting conservative family, but I also had this love for music and art, and that, was the cliche of fiscally conservative and socially liberal. In Bitcoin, it was the finish line, but before that, I was listening to a lot of stuff like on both right and the left. Like I would listen to stuff like everything from Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and Buck Sexton, and then Steven Crowder. And then that led me to libertarianism because I found Dave Smith's show Part of the Problem. And then from there, that eventually led to Bitcoin. And I think people that arrive at Bitcoin, it does take them a while. And so, as we were kind of talking about people, it's kind of like the ultimate litmus test is if you can meet people and you can both agree from Bitcoin. It's like, okay, we can really continue this conversation. Whereas if you kind of, take a girl out and you know, after drinking, get to know each other, like, oh yeah, this is fun. And then, she brings something up like communism or some, like environmental whatever. And then it's like, oh, I gotta cut it. Not that I had that exact experience, but I think, people can relate to things that are similar to that. And so it's just really great how Bitcoiners can just meet each other online and know it's going to be fine when you meet each other in person finally. And when that does happen, just smooth sailing, you know, kicking back drinks from there,
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love. There have been multiple conversations, or so many people that I've met in these conferences or at meetups, uh, to where, yeah, we have a couple beers and we're talking, and it feels like we've known each other for a very long time, because we're just kind of transcending that initial uh, initial quandary of like, oh, where does this person stand? We can
Yeah.
kind of move past a lot of those initial barriers, I guess, and go a lot deeper. Uh, yeah, so I've really enjoyed that a lot. I like this concept of I first for me, I've always been passionate about like personal connections and community and social interaction. I think that it's a very essential part of who we are as humans. And for uh, our civilization, as far as we've come, it's sometimes that part of things seems to be pushed by the wayside, and for the sake of productivity, for the sake of like growth, and all the fiat type, the fiat economy um, tends to focus on uh, all these other things, whereas like community, social interaction, the things that are free, like family, interactions of love, like those things are a lot of times what bring us the most joy and the most enjoyment in life. So like
Yeah.
one thing that I think is just really amazing, and that I've tried to like focus on in the meetups here in Miami, and then in my conversations just with other Bitcoiners, is kind of this social this understanding of the social layer of Bitcoin, right? And when kind of what you said about Bitcoin at being this Schelling point, that was Pierre Richard. I don't know who
Yeah, I think it was him.
coined that. Um, yeah, I remember reading that article, but yeah, it's like it does function as a social Schelling point as well, because uh, obviously we're all going to interact with people that we have stuff in common with, and it does provide that like base layer for a strong community, I think. So
Yeah.
is that what you've found as well?
Yeah, totally. And a lot of people talk about Bitcoin and thinking about it at first principles. And as you alluded to, fiat is just a artificial distraction from things that really matter. And somehow people are able to climb through all the BS and realize what real truth is, because Ron Paul kind of talks about how important the family unit is, and I'm not like a huge family guy. Like I don't see myself having like a Citadel with like 20 kids or anything, but it is really important to have that strong unit. And because Bitcoiners
Maybe
do
like 15 kids, 10,
uh, mi-
15.
mi- lucky 13. Nah. But yeah, it's cool that Bitcoiners can come as a family or even start their own community, and that's kind of what the first form of a Citadel might look like. It's a voluntary, opt-in, contractual agreement to live by these rules, and it really is the manifestation of liberty and free markets offers. Because I think I forget who really coined this. Maybe it was like Rothbard, or probably Thomas Sowell talks about this too. But like people's default is poverty. And from there, the next default is how do you get over that obstacle? And that inherently is free markets and innovation, and using the resources around you and mixing that with your own labor and progressing. And you can only do that in a true voluntary fashion. And if you try to do so coercively, then that kind of sends a signal to the market, the rest of the people in the world, to react against that, and to basically have this, again, going back to litmus tests, like litmus tests that coercive energy out so the rest of society can progress. And Bitcoin, being a stateless money, really allows for this to happen, because the coercive elements of taxation and inflation, which is really the silent killer, isn't possible, because you can't confiscate Bitcoin from someone, maybe violently, but as people listening to this kind of understand the sovereign individual thesis, is that there is no real rate on return on violence. And Bitcoin is just the most ultimate form of protection of true property rights. And again, that property that you're able to create in a free market voluntarist manner by mixing your labor with the resources around you. And so you have it's really cool. I talked to Hector from Casa, and he was going through how you can take Bitcoin, you can apply like the Bill of Rights to it, like all first 10 amendments. And the one thing that really sticks with me, and I got this also when I interviewed David Friedman, Milton Friedman's son, on the HCCP video they did last fall. But what he and Hector Rosecrans kind of allude to is that Bitcoin can be applied as like the Second Amendment of the 21st century, or the cryptography is the Second Amendment of the 21st century, the right to bear arms, but it's also this right to have this weapon of self-defense, in that it is a weapon of self-defense, because it can't be stolen from you. It can't be confiscated from you in an offensive manner as well. So just being able to freely use your talent and labor to produce and acquire resources, and adding the fact that you can have that protected with cryptography, is just a real game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially.
And this goes back to guns and Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's another. I keep going back in my mind as and it's something that I think we say a lot when we're together, is what a fucking amazing time to be alive, right? Like, I just feel this extreme sense of gratitude whenever I really think about this, to say like, wow, to be involved in something like this and to at such an early stage and to be witnessing this kind of change for humanity be taking place, it's truly amazing. Because it really is another step, uh, another it it's a transition into a new layer of protection of the individual, of the individual's rights, right? Or
Yeah.
another another how am I trying to say this? Another layer of empowerment for the individual,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, it's fucking amazing. It's so
Yeah.
cool.
And I guess I kind of missed your first question about how this kind of relates on the social layer, right? But I guess we can bring it back to that, because the more like each individual is protected, they basically are less under pressure. They can feel like that they can truly express themselves,
Hmm.
because people in our space will talk about how money is just information, and it's this information that allows us to express our value. And Bitcoin is censorship resistant as well, so this could also go into play of expressing your values in a cancel culture proof way as well. And I think
Hmm.
that the more people that realize that, hopefully that this can slowly kill cancel culture in a way, because I mean, people will get deplatformed or whatever, and in a way they kind of lose, they don't they lose their property rights in the sense where, maybe they'll lose advertisement or whatever, but Bitcoin's always a hedge against that. And I think the more people that's do grab onto Bitcoin, especially like victims of deplatforming or people that feel victimized and they feel like they need to deplatform people, I think the more people that grasp onto Bitcoin, like you said, they will feel like more empowered and protected, and maybe they'll feel less threatened, and maybe their need to remove people from from the earth will decrease as well.
Yeah, 100%. Especially from an entrepreneurial standpoint, looking at like what, because for entrepreneurs right now trying to operate in the fiat system, you have to go through this filter of like, well, what's a business or a service that I can provide people that people are going to want, but also like what I have to also think about, not just what people want, but what am I going to be permitted to like market, and what's what's not going to be like, what's not going to ruffle too many feathers, what's going to be like appeasing to the masses, because I'm ultimately beholden to these banking and financial structures that uh, control the flow of money to my business.
Yeah.
And I think, certain like certain industries, like the sin industries, are kind of um, usually the first to be maligned, or industries that are often misunderstood, or niche markets that you know serve a small group of people um, that uh, yeah, that are easy to be canceled, right? That's
Yeah.
where cancel culture has a real impact on the actual market. So I think it's what's cool is with Bitcoin, you can actually look at the real market and say, okay, there are people who have Bitcoin, and I want to serve them. I want to get some of their Bitcoin, so I want to offer them some sort of service or some kind of product that they actually want, and you can actually do that
Yeah.
without needing anyone's permission.
Yeah. Or without having payments get canceled. Like,
Right.
this is why I haven't looked into it so much, but I mean, one of the reasons why Strike's been a big deal, like now helping out like with remittances in South America, but then also like Jack Mallers helped make that made that product to help the marijuana industry, and this could also be
Hmm.
applied to the porn industry,
Mm-hmm.
and if OnlyFans kicks someone off for whatever reason, it'll be a hard push, but that content creator can go preach the word of Bitcoin to their fans and hopefully get their fans to adopt Bitcoin and support them that way. And this also gets applied to guns or anything that is fringe and might question the status quo and may even threaten the system as we know it. And so Bitcoin's kind of like the only thing that people cannot, their values that they believe in can't be silenced. If you can just pay someone money, uh like true good sound money, whenever, wherever they want.
100%. Yeah, man. And I love what you were saying about like how having access to this technology that enables you to store your time, to store your energy in this sovereign way, gives you a sense of security to express yourself freely, right? And and that's I don't know, one of the powerful things that I've thought about a lot, and that I think other Bitcoiners have like talked about and expressed as well, is this almost is this spiritual aspect to where we are able to live truly, and we're able to express ourselves truly, and have like, and to speak truth, and to actually like seek truth in our conversations, in our arguments, and in that process, um, that that's what the Bible talked about as the word, like as the logos, as the
Yeah.
divine, um, as Jesus went in the book of John, in the gospel. John says the word, in the beginning was a word, the logos, and the word was God, and the word was with God, or the word was with God, and the word was God. I don't know the exact order. And then later it says the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and he's talking about Jesus. Uh, so in a very real sense, like this is the ability to speak truth, and to actually have open and honest discussion, and is of is like God's presence with man.
No,
I really
totally.
believe that.
Yeah, I do too. I love how Breedlove talked about masters and slaves and money, how like I agree with him
Mm-hmm.
100% when he says that to some extent Bitcoin is God working through people in the free market and this manifestation of his word and power and salvation that humans can grasp onto. And I have Brian Harrington on my podcast, and he's known to be spiritual, and it really is. I'm not like the biggest like Godhead or anything, but I don't think that we're here on accident, and the world goes through ebbs and flows of pain and suffering, and going back to man and free markets and mixing their labor with the resources around them. I think in a way that's God working through them and the Holy Spirit to create innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And Bitcoin is manifestation of that innovation, because out of necessity comes the innovation. You have all this push and pressure, and that's why you see with any time governments try to ban Bitcoin or prohibit anything, like whether it's alcohol or drugs or rock and roll, whatever, people push back on that. They react. And this goes back to what Sawer says about like physics and equal and opposites reactions. Like you're gonna get some pushback, especially if it's from this top down authoritarian manner that doesn't jive with the way everyone else thinks and feels. I mean, well, they don't have to think and feel the same thing, but people don't like being told no. And
Mm-hmm.
humans are smart, and so they're going to find a way to get over that hurdle. And by the grace of God, he got the smartest brains over time to work on stuff, and that ultimately is what became the beautiful amalgamation of cryptography and economics and tech, and that's really what manifested Bitcoin. And I think it was like always him or some greater spiritual thing working through people, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, man, 100%. For a long time, I have a very religious background, um, but I've been out of, yeah. Yeah, in high school, I had a very spiritual experience that led me to study Christianity and to um, actually be trained to be a pastor for like a large
Cool.
portion of my life. Like I spent 10 years in like Bible college and internships and seminary, learning preaching and learning some Hebrew and Greek and trying to like do my best to understand scripture and in order to like understand God and in order to be able to communicate who he is and what the biblical truth is to other people. Um, and I've been out of that world for a while. I haven't really even been involved in church for the last six years or so, but like
Why do you
the
think that is, if you don't mind me
uh
interrupting?
yeah, sure. Well, there's a number of things that happened that kind of is a momentous time in my life that kind of shifted my understanding of what I was doing in church and in the religious world. What I came to realize was a lot of the energy, a lot of what I was doing was not necessarily going down the spiritual path that I initially started on. A lot of my mental energy was caught up in like preserving this ego identity that I had as like this Christian person, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Um, and kind of like preserving and building up this um, ideological structure, which was like a very specific set of beliefs that I needed to like hold and believe in my heart, as well as like defend and propagate. Um, and it was I kind of describe it as like um, a belief structure that's all like woven together to
Mm-hmm.
where you're kind of like taking this doctrine, that doctrine, and all like kind of pasting all of them together, where if you like if one of them is challenged, then the entire structure kind of like
Yeah.
disintegrates or falls apart. And um and that's what Christianity was for me and for a lot of people that I was involved with at the time. And one of the uh, this is obviously a very personal conversation, but I don't mind sharing it because I think it's very it may be something that people have experienced themselves as well. But one of the things I realized was like I was sitting there thinking about this, and I realized that like my belief in hell and my fear of hell was the thing that was like keeping me from really questioning any of uh, any of these uh, any of these beliefs. And I saw it as like this like fiery gate that was like keeping me in this walled
You were having to
garden, so
sense
to speak.
you were having to censor yourself because you thought thinking
Yeah,
outside the box of what you were trained to do and preach was uh basically sacrilegious.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Which and so in that way, like from so yeah, that kind of made me think like, well, why if this is the truth, like, why can't it be analyzed from all different angles? Why can't I allow, like, why do I have to be limited in 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 uh, in my questioning? So yeah, it's a very that's a whole podcast in and of itself, I think.
Yeah.
But eventually, you know, I realized that what what initially started me down this path was a very clear and real experience of what I think to be like the presence of God, or connection to the universe, to connection to the life force that kind of like creates and energizes everything that exists. I felt a very strong connection to that, and that created a change in me, to where before there I had all this like dark, heavy energy inside of me, that where I was like really hateful of other people, and very contracting, and unable to express myself, unable to express love for people that I appreciated, and all of that was released through this through this experience, and I was able to like actually express love to my mom and to my brothers, and yeah, and that change was very real, and I just wanted to understand like what that was, and I've always been kind of questioning like what's lying underneath all of this experience that we're having. Like, it's so weird that we're actually even here, and you know what's the meaning of it all. So I've always kind of like been fascinated by those questions, and through my background and everything, I was led to scripture and to the Christian teachings in order to try to explore the foundations of that. So yeah, that led me. I don't know where we're going with this, but at the end of the day, I found, kind of bringing it back to like my transition, or why it's been 6 years since I've been to church. I needed to like separate from it for a certain period of time, I think,
Yeah.
in order to I, it was just a part of my journey, I suppose. But now I've coming back to a lot of these biblical principles, and teachings that the church has really preserved through thousands of years, through 2,000 years. There is some core, some very valuable teachings there, and very beneficial things that like that I still embrace. I think that um, coming to see them, especially after Bitcoin and everything, I've been kind of like reintroduced to a lot of these things, and see the value of them.
Yeah, it's kind of
Sense.
like God in a way knocking on your door, like you kind of needed to separate yourself, take a break. And it sounds like you were doing that because you were just it seems that the true principles that really were totems of your spirituality and what you believed in were becoming more in the background, and you were just kind of distracted by these other abstractions that were kind of layered on top of the core principles. And that could
Right.
probably be influenced by pop culture, because like I grew up in like a Methodist church, and there was like a youth area, and I would like play music every Sunday for um it was kind of young lifey, but just like every Sunday, and practice once a week, and like that was great. But then you also hear like the mega churches that do that, and it's like every congregation is like seeing a U2 concert in a way. And
Yeah.
um and that's cool and all, and that's a good way to get people into the door. But at the same time, there is something that is forgotten and lost, and you kind of lose like a purity. And I don't think I've ever really experienced that, but
Mm.
there's like this form of like Catholicism, which is like traditional religion, but it's so much more than that. It's very internal and spiritual, and they do the whole mass in Latin and everything. And
Mhm.
it's just this old school mentality of when you go to church, you go in a disciplined manner to where you devote yourself to God, to the word, to Jesus, whatever. And that is a reason why this is supposed to be a sacred thing that is separate from any other outside distraction. There's a reason why you say these original texts in Latin. And so again, I never really experienced anything like that, but I have friends that still go to, those kind of masses, and it's a world of difference when they walk out than going to, some mega rock star church kind of thing. You
Mhm.
have this more connection. It is about you and your relationship to, um, to God. And I don't really want to speak for anyone, especially as I said, I never been to something like that, but it is something that is missing, because there is another idea of just being like a lukewarm Christian, going with the motions and going to church, and maybe listening to what your preacher has to say, and then it just goes in one ear and out the other, and it's more like a social event to where you've got kids and you drop them off at Sunday school and you go chit
Mhm.
chat with your friends, whatever, and get breakfast tacos, whatever, then pick up the kids and leave again. And it's just kind of like a thing that you do. And
Yeah.
the true word gets kind of lost from the wayside. And in a way, it may become fake, and you lose that connection to what God kind of wants you to have. And it becomes this religious practice that, again, something that you do every day. It's on the calendar, to where it is just in one ear and out the other. And it's not that spiritual, because from what I understand, the thing about God and the church is that as individuals, we are the church, right? Because wherever you go, you bring
Mhm.
the church with you. Because if you are a disciple and you preach the word of God, you don't need a centralized place to do that. And this kind of goes back to Bitcoin, is that when I had Brian Bishop on my show, he was talking about how Jesus went out and looked for like the one sheep and carried him up the hill or whatever. And this kind of goes back to, I don't know how this goes back to sacrificing the sheep, but basically like we are his like lone sheep that he will go out and find, and he won't leave us behind. And the
Mm.
church itself, I didn't realize how centralized it was, but until Jesus died, people were having to go and sacrifice the lamb or whatever valuable resource that they had on their farm or whatever. And that was an atonement. Is that what the word is? Maybe, but it was like the sacrifice that you gave to Christ, and you had to, it was like your healthiest sheep or chicken or ox or whatever, and that was the sacrifice that you had to pay to God in order to get to heaven and spill that blood. And when Jesus dies, he fills that role, like for everybody and everybody's sin. And that sacrifice you gave was also, I don't think the same thing, but aligned with something similar into that. Anytime you wanted to go talk to God, you had to, pay
Mhm.
the priest or whatever to
Oh
go
yeah.
to the confession booth. And again, it's just like the financial
And they
system.
access the centralized temple where the presence of God was, like behind the veil, uh, you know, ordained and like mediated by the priesthood, by this kind of centralized bureaucratic structure.
Exactly.
That's how it all was.
And
Yeah.
I mean, this is, I guess, before the separation of church and state. The church was the state.
Oh yeah.
And it's still exactly how our financial system works, whether it be the banks and the Fed or the IMF or whatever.
Hmm.
And, you know, Jesus sacrificing himself. It's almost like, well, even the story about like the weights and measures, basically how people were being charged to be let into the church, and they were basically getting cheated in like the money they were using by the guys at the booth charging them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like the one time Jesus got pissed off because he was like, hey, you're fucking with the money and you're overcharging these people to come into the church and whatever. So he
Mm-hmm.
flips the tables and everything. And it's almost like he was always a sound money maximalist in a way, but really what that unsound money was a bastardization of the word of the truth. uh because
Mm-hmm.
if you have bad money, it's not really reflecting the true price and the true value. It's being distorted. And the same thing was being applied to the word of God to some extent.
Oh yeah.
And Jesus was calling bullshit on that, and he was basically a threat to the banking system, or really the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was really kind of the first, anarchist, or like no God but Christ, like no government but Christ in a way. And he was a threat to the system. That's kind of why they offed him, you know. And his sacrifice through that, though, was him spilling his blood, him being the sacrificial lamb. So we don't have to pay the piper every time we want to go talk to God, because I may be screwing the story up, but him sacrificing himself is kind of what bestowed the Holy Spirit into everyone and made their relationship with God decentralized. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe this downplays God or overplays Bitcoin, but it really is the corruption of money that leads to the fracturing of society, because money is the fabric of society. And when it's tainted and corrupted by centralized power, then you're essentially able to play God with their lives and lie and cheat to people by manipulating the pricing mechanism and making people make poor decisions and poor choices. And
Yeah.
you actually have all the power in your hands when you have a separation of money and state. Because again, this goes back to expressing your values. And when you don't have the separation of church and state, you got this dictator telling you what to believe and how to believe in it and how to get access to that belief. And with the separation of money and state, you basically have separation of everything in state. So church, just everything. And so I guess this also goes back to God working through people to use the free market to create this innovation to truly free them and manifest himself through uh through humans and work through humans, like work through people as the Holy Spirit. And Bitcoin might be the first step, or like the weapon that we need to achieve that for him.
I think so. I definitely think so. The one of what's fascinating, if you look at this, um, the biblical accounts of the crucifixion and the resurrection. Um, I think I'm pretty sure it's in Matthew. I don't know. I need to look this up about which book describes this, but when Christ was crucified, it describes the uh, uh, basically a um, like natural creation sort of is there's this momentous, like, thunderous event, and the veil in the temple is torn. So in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, there was the Holy of Holies, which was the centermost point in the temple, and that held was supposed to hold the Ark of the Covenant, and that was the in that Holy of Holies was like the presence of God on earth. That was where God was revealing his presence. And only the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies at like very specific times in the year, right? So you had, and this process and this protocol was described in the Old Testament, like in very specific instructions, so that like the people knew how God was going to be expressed, or how God's presence was going to be revealed to his people, like through this very specific process, right? And in the New Testament, when Christ dies, the veil that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the world was severed. So like
Just
torn
like,
in half.
nope, not how this gonna work.
Yeah. And so what's crazy, and if you look at like that veil is like 8 inches thick. It's like a really thick veil. So, presumably this happened. Like it's, we're taking people's word for it, right? That this actually happened. But even the symbolic representation of that, like what that means and what that communicates in the Christian mythology, if you want to take it just from that standpoint, it's that like Jesus is bringing the presence of God to man directly, right? So you no longer need to go through a third party. You no longer need to go to a specific place through a high priest, through a sacrifice, through all these other means in order to communicate with God and to decipher his will. It's God is with man. That's what Emmanuel actually means, is God with us. So Jesus was God with us, his coming, right? Yeah. So I love talking about this stuff. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and a lot of this is like very, I don't know. I think it has a lot to do with Bitcoin, and a lot to do with what we're trying to do in fixing the money. Just because like that, like you were saying, this is the way that we are exercising our own sovereignty over our own lives, and actually like determining what's valuable to us, and trying to find God's will, right? And find God's presence in our lives, to find like what is the true most optimal path forward. And if we have true trice signals and are able to like attribute value to things individually, then we have like a very real understanding of what's actually valuable in life. And I think that can carry us as a civilization forward into like a really amazing time. And I think that's what we're witnessing now. So like bringing it back to community, one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking about the church was like, the church has been sort of the foundational aspect of most communities throughout like Western civilization. And I think that they've done a lot of things right, but obviously like have their pitfalls. There's all kinds of churches and all different kinds of like corruption that's taken place, like melding these types of religious principles with the state, and with top down governance. But
and that it kind of goes into how like that politics is downstream from culture, so that kind of influences the way everyone thinks and acts on a daily basis, I'd imagine.
Definitely. Yeah, man. We got deep.
Did.
It's got deep. Uh, yeah, I do like. I like to think. I really think that money is the most spiritual part of any civilization, um, any society. Like, because you know we have it's like it is that basic uh, communication layer that where every things we're communicating the base level of information that's actually needed to be communicated about any given item is just like automatically transmitted throughout the system, right? So it's the thing that like connects all of us together um, at a global level. So I'm excited for what Bitcoin is as a hard money, as a digital hard money, is going to do for humanity, to where like we'll be able to connect globally with with just humanity. Hopefully, the Bitcoin community just turns into humanity, and we can have true price signals on everything, and um, you know explore and and go from there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and even if people like don't become like the virtuous Bitcoiners as we try to be, that's okay, because the whole thing about price signals is setting true information and letting the whole world know what works and doesn't work. And when things don't work, then they fail automatically, like they fail fast, as should
Yeah.
happen in a free market. And so the only thing that props up the failures is the central bank, whoever's
Mm-hmm.
manipulating the money, because that failure is too big to fail and it's close to the money spigot, and it has its influence on the population so much. And so that corruption and that capitalism doesn't exist when you have true prices actually speaking truth, the logos.
Yeah.
And so I just like this last point I want to make is that people that aren't Bitcoiners tend to think that we believe in some utopia, that it's an absolute lie, because this is not, because it is not a utopia is exactly why it works.
Mm-hmm.
Because because the powers that be try to keep this quote unquote like their version of utopia going by bailing out the ones that are too big to fail. And this really led us to the whole idea of MMT, that we're just going to keep printing money and keeping things going, and the chickens will come home to roost, as they say, eventually. And hopefully Bitcoin, actually I do believe Bitcoin, as we're starting to see, will be that smooth transition and have that true great reset that we actually need, and will instill logos back into the world.
Amen. Amen, brother.
Amen.
Yeah. Preach. Oh yes.
Oh yeah. Hell
Spirit.
Satoshi.
So one of the something I saw just in your bio, which kind of relates to what you're just saying, I think, is own your failure. So it seems to me that that's something you hold like very dear, very very. It's kind of a personal
Yeah.
belief, and I wonder if you could elaborate, like maybe if there's a particular experience that like
Yeah, man.
made
So
that real for you.
yeah, so that's funny. I think I've talked about this. I can't recall if I have on the show, but that comes from my AP human geography teacher in freshman year of high school, named Brent Ostos. And he was funny, man. Just like history teachers are always kind of the out there ones, and they have their quirks, and they're very opinionated. And this guy was, I don't want to say brilliant, not like some Elon Musk or anything. Well, people might say Elon Musk isn't brilliant, but like whatever. Just a really great teacher. He cared. And he just had a, don't like fuck with him attitude, or like he didn't care. It was inspiring, but it was also kind of like a he could come across as crass and rude. And if someone was complaining about, oh, the reading's too long, or this is hard, I don't want to do this, and then they end up failing the test or whatever, or they make a mistake, he'd always say, own your failure. That's your fault. Own it. Be proud of this and learn from it. Or, maybe he was just saying it as like a throwaway. It's like, another thing he would say is that if someone complains to them about something, he would go, that sounds like a personal problem. Just look all sincere, but just be very smart ass about it. But the whole own your failure thing, as snide as he may have been, I think he was also very sincere about that as well. Because as humans, we're not perfect. I mean, we are human and we make mistakes, and we need to look at every mistake, whether it's a failure or not, take ownership of it, and not really have, I guess, regrets, because regrets are just things that you look back on in life that you can reflect on to continuously improve. And I say at the end of my show, since I've been doing my show, which is called A Boy Named Pseu, like the Johnny Cash song, but spelled Pseu, is own your failure, because God knows our so-called leaders don't. And this goes back to the Fed, the state, and it's just by the incentives of a corroded system to where they're not incentivized to own their failure, because they just kick the can down the road and do whatever they need to get votes and appeal to the public and just bullshit their way into success. And they may commit a lot of failures and casualties along the way that maybe they care about and regret, or maybe they just don't care. Maybe they are psychopaths and evil or whatever, but I'm not really one to speak for them. But whether or not they do own their failure as individuals, it would seem that on a grand scale, if you look back at history, they say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and you see continuous failures of the corruption of money, and just from the corruption of money you get failures, and just this mismanagement of the economy and the mismanagement of the world, because that's what happens when you have central planners. You can't micromanage something on a macro level. And if history says anything, our leaders have not owned their failure. And hopefully with Bitcoin, they will be forced to, or at least they'll actually be able to fail hard and fast and for good. And a free market solution will replace them. And so it's important, I feel like, for me to remind myself and my audience is to own your failure, because God knows our so-called leaders do not. And because we're individuals participating in this as free a market as we can be, Bitcoin is the ultimate tool that enables us to do that by expressing our value. And even if our values were, I guess we misallocated our value in our decision, we'll fail hard and fast, and we'll learn from it, and we'll own it. And that's going to happen in a free market or not, but it'll be much more clear cut in a free market, which Bitcoin provides.
100%. Yeah, man. I think that's definitely it's a theme that I've heard from many mentors, as well. Like, it's much easier said, or to espouse it, I suppose, than to actually own up to your failures. Because
and it's hard, man.
It could be, yeah, dude. Like, it's embarrassing, right? Sometimes it's embarrassing to own up to the fact that, like, you fucked up, or that you had a complete miscalculation of value in your life. But fuck, we all do it. Every single person does it. So
and it's also kind of like relieving too, right? Because it's
Oh
like
yeah.
going back and forgiving yourself or forgiving others, even if they did wrong you. It
Yeah.
really, it, someone might argue this sounds really cuck, you know? But if you do just kind of like let go and let God, or just like let go and give forgiveness and love, even if you feel like it's not well deserved, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Not to make myself sound super high and mighty or anything, but it's just you're the better man for it. And if you just, cut ties and say, you know what, I forgive you, it's fine, forget about it, and you just let go and move on with your life, you can do that. But like when it comes to like a personal level, you don't want to just like forgive and forget. Like you want to forgive yourself, and maybe some little things are not as worth remembering as they should be. But those big mistakes, you do need to remember and learn from them, and then, forget, in the sense like not dwell on them, and just take that lesson and apply it to life.
Oh yeah.
But it's just like this huge weight off your shoulders when, you ask for forgiveness, really, to anyone. If you have all this tension kind of built up inside about something about someone wronged you, or you wronged someone in the past,
Hmm.
call them up on the phone or whatever, see them in person, because this is what Breelove was recently talking about on Lex Friedman's show. Somehow they got to oh, man, that was a 4-hour rip of a podcast. Really great if no one's listened to it yet. But they
Yeah.
are,
I've yet to listen to it. It's definitely on the list for me.
oh dude, it's so
Yeah.
good. But they get to the conclusion, like, at the end of the day, it's all love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like necessity and like value is subjective in values. Um and Bitcoin allows us to express our values, or like what we love. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. People want to be loved. He was also talking about this with Jeff Booth. Um because all the people are really seeking is to be wanted and appreciated
Mm.
and feel gratitude. And one of the
Hmm.
best ways that you can do that is just kind of like wipe away the tension and grief by expressing love and forgiveness. Like, love your neighbor. And that really just kind of becomes a lot easier if you're on a sound money standard, I feel. I don't really know how, but like in my gut, and I can probably go into it if I really think longer about it, but it's easier to express love because I think love is logos as well. Love is truth. Because when you love somebody, not that I have like a soulmate right now, hopefully, maybe someday out there, but when you have love for someone, that means that you'll have you'll be able to give sacrifice to them, and that sacrifice is an atonement to love. And Brie Love and Jeff Booth were talking about how when you are building a business, you're giving a sacrifice, you're taking a chance, because that business could fail, but out of the love and your desire to create and innovate and provide this good and service into the economy, you're sacrificing your labor and your time, um, because you're loving and feeding off of this high of creating innovation and providing value to people. And so it is kind of like, I feel like human action economics is just natural through people. Kind of how we can go back to how poverty, but economics and action is like the default of humanity, and creating property. But I think that all kind of comes full circle into expressing love and distributing love. And you know
Oh yeah.
like sing it, John Lennon, like all you need is love.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man. It's a that's just, yeah, man. It's truly. I mean, that's like the gospel. That's the good news, right?
Yeah.
Like Jesus. I hate to just make this like a super Jesus filled podcast, but
Fuck it.
That's what it's becoming. So, you know, he, I, I'm very confident. uh, I've said before that I think love is the most powerful energy that exists.
Yeah.
And if we're talking in energetic terms, and I think we're moving into a period of time where we're realizing that pretty much everything is energy and information, and various frequencies. Reality is a continuation of like uh,
I mean, it's kind of like what Taylor talks about, right? Is that
right,
Bitcoin is energy, or money is
right,
energy. It's a technology, but money is
right,
a manifestation of the time and energy that it took to create that love or that good and service that somebody queried, like requested, that needed.
yeah,
And not to say that money is love, but money is an expression of value, and
right,
people arguably create value out of love or a desire,
yeah,
and
yeah. I
they
think
and they put
value
in
creates,
sacrifice.
or one way to say it is, yeah, love creates more value than anything else,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So thinking about like the optimal path forward, now that we don't rely on a system that's like built on lies and
Yeah.
manipulation and fear, um, we now have truth as a foundation. So now we can hopefully love wins.
Yeah. It's so circular, like love and logos, and the product of love is the ultimate expression of value,
Yeah.
because we all want to be valued by something or someone.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's
Wow.
that's a foundational, that's that's what we all long for,
Yeah.
that love and belonging. So you can sign up for my cult. I'll be giving everyone plenty of love and belonging if you want to sign up.
Great.
Uh, Man, it's this is awesome. I I think we solved the major world problems, and
Pretty much, dude.
all people have to do is listen to this podcast, and then like we'll be set. Everything will
Yeah.
be smooth sailing from here on out.
All you need is love. We did it. We're done. Clock me out.
Oh man. Well, dude, is there are you coming out to Miami in June?
Yeah,
All right.
definitely am. So
I'm
yeah, we'll
excited.
see each other. Trying to figure out who I'm gonna sell my whale pass to. But I'll be there for everything else. Excuse
We
me.
should start a whale pass marketplace.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Maybe find a way. Yeah, man. Speaking of like bringing people together, I think, and Bitcoiners coming together. I think that I'm really looking forward to that conference. It's going to be just an amazing time. A lot of people coming down to Miami and reconnecting. A lot of pent up like Bitcoiner energy is going to be released.
Yeah,
into Miami. It's gonna be amazing.
it is, man. I'm stoked. It's been a good year for Bitcoin,
Hell yeah.
and more to come.
Hell yeah.
100K by May. Is that what the laser eye thing is?
100K by May. I could see it going there. I think. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
I'm along for the ride, that's for sure.
For sure.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share or shill? I'd love to, whoever's listening at this
Yeah,
point,
man.
I'd love to That's what I think is cool about the podcast thing is like I have a few people who might listen to me who haven't heard of you, and you have a podcast, you have some different things to share. So I'd love to give you some exposure.
Yeah, dude. Appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on. This was a very cosmic, radical discussion. I appreciate that. It's good for people to hear new, different perspectives. My show's, as I mentioned, A Boy Named Pseu, like the Johnny Cash song. So, A Boy Named Pseu is how you spell that. My Twitter is at Mr. Pseu, MRPSEU. And it's a Bitcoin podcast. I'm first and foremost a musician at heart. I wrote a song called ETF, which stands for End the Fed, but I wrote it last August, and I thought it was fitting because people wanted a Bitcoin ETF, and Canada's already got 3 of them. So I don't know. I tried to make it the Bitcoin song, but without being too cringy, and I'm really proud of it. I had a great time with it. I did that with Richard James, who did the Sound Money film, and Bitco Yanowski did the artwork for it, and it was just amazing collaborating with them. And I just put all my heart and soul into the song. Lyrically, it's about like the Fed and just all the things that happened in 2020, and me trying to learn a lot at once, make sense of it, and put it in like 3.5-ish minutes. And so that's what ETF is. So if you want to listen to it, it's my pinned tweet on my Twitter. It's just a little like 2-minute music video of it. But if you want to see the full video, you can just click into show all replies, and I've got the lyrics there, the YouTube link to it, and it's streaming everywhere that you stream music as well. So that's like the artist name is Mr. Pseu, MR.PSEU, and it's called ETF. And there's periods after each letter, so E period, T period, F period. Maybe that was a mistake. I don't know. Whatever. I should have just gone all caps ETF, gone caps Odell on it, but whatever. No regrets, right? Like we talked about. Own your failure. But yeah.
It's a great song.
Thanks, man.
Great song, man.
Appreciate it.
Huge fan.
But yeah.
Awesome, dude. Thanks so much, Phil. It's great catching up again. Look forward to talking to you again in person. I may be coming back through Austin here. So if I do, definitely hit you up. We'll hang.
For sure, man.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Phil. I had a great time talking to him. Again, be sure to follow Phil on Twitter at Mr. Pseu. And as always, if you want to support the show, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with anyone that you think might be interested or resonate with the message. And visit thebitcoinpath.com to learn more about other events and ways to contribute. Also, for those of you who are coming to Miami, make sure and go to theplebparty.com. Go to plebparty.com, and check out more information around the Have Fun Staying Pleb unofficial kickoff party for the Bitcoin 2021 conference. It's going to be June 3rd. Tickets are on sale. There's a limited amount of space, so be sure to get your spot. And if you want to pay with Bitcoin or Lightning, you get a 10% discount with the code PLEBSUSEBITCOIN. Hope to see you there. And if you'd like to connect, feel free to email me at info@thebitcoinpath.com. And also, if you're coming through Miami, not just for the conference, but any other time, I host a meetup here, Miami Bitcoiners meetup, twice a month. So if you're coming through the area, hit me up, and I'd love to meet you. Always down to connect and grab coffee with another Bitcoiner. So until next time, may you live a meaningful life and enjoy your freedom as a sovereign individual.